walk into my home with my entire family there and let them know my sister was brain dead and would be removed off of life support. And ever since then, I have never felt the same way about Thanksgiving. This is actually the first year I decided to completely opt out and not host, not celebrate. I'm spending most of the day alone, and that's okay with me. My sister was only 29, and for me, I don't really know what I count as her exact day of death. To me, there's it happened over the period of a week. So I think of it as in terms of when I first found out, when I found out that she was brain dead, and then when I removed her, or when they removed her off life support, and I was there. So to me, it's 3 days, so it doesn't really matter. They all kind of hurt. So the day before Thanksgiving is when I actually got the call, and the doctors actually placed my sister in a medically induced coma. And when I arrived at the hospital and I saw her connected to all these tubes, it was really scary, but all the doctors were acting so nonchalant. They're like, you know what, we put her in a medically induced coma so that she could heal and her body wouldn't be stressed, and we're gonna wake her up in a couple hours. And so I'm like, okay, she's gonna be fine. We'll, my family's on their way. I was the first one there, and I was like, what time should I come back when you wake her up? Because I don't want her to wake up and be alone and confused. So what time should I come back? And I'll never forget it because I damn near passed out on that floor right there. He said, we don't know if she will, and walked out. And I just couldn't. And I remember thinking to myself, no, this wouldn't happen to us. This wouldn't happen to me. I thought I had just survived the worst time in my life. This wouldn't be and it's so humbling to look back at and think now, why wouldn't it be me? Why not? Why did I think I was so special and I was, above what God had in store for me just because I thought that it had been enough? And it's truly humbling to look back at, honestly. And that day would begin the worst time in my life. And it quickly turned into the fight for my sister's life. They did not follow, and by they I mean the hospitals and doctors, they did not follow the necessary testing, timeline, protocols. And I'm like, okay, they're probably just trying to rush and get this over with because they want to go home for Thanksgiving. But to me, my sister was worth so much more than that. She was worth a second opinion. She was worth a fair chance. But immediately the hospital demanded that if we were not going to donate her organs, she was going to be immediately taken off life support. I requested a second opinion. They denied me. So I requested to get a private second opinion. I offered to pay for private transport. They declined it. And I knew the time was ticking. So I had my little brother stay at the hospital with her as much as he could. And we tried to divide up our time. We began calling clinics, specialists. We began trying to have any resources that we could. People even arranged for a protest outside of the hospital. And still, that was not enough. And this is during the holiday weekend, so it was nearly impossible to get a hold of anybody. We were racing against a ticking time bomb, and time was not on our side. People can say what they want about the internet, but the internet came through for me. It was the first time that I had posted in 6 months to a year, and it was just shocking, I guess. And it was not how I wanted to come, but I came with a plea, and I asked everyone to make a call and demand the preservation of my sister's life. And in retaliation to me sharing the doctor's info, they removed my sister off of her fluids and IVs because she had pneumonia. So I knew that things were quickly only going to get worse. Really, it was only my mother, my brother, and I. We don't really have any family. So we were limited on resources. We decided to have my brother stay at the hospital and do whatever he could to preserve her life. And then one of us drove hours to a doctor who said he could provide us with stem cell treatments. We were willing to try that. So I ended up having to hire my attorney, who was actually on vacation. I hired him to come back, and he was sending the hospital attorneys demand letters for the preservation of her life and the right to a second opinion. And they were doing things like saying oh, we never received the fax, we never did that. But once their names were public on social media and they started receiving calls, then they were willing to negotiate with my attorney. And in exchange for me taking down the doctor's names, they were willing to give her back the fluids. By that time, we were willing to try that. So I ended up having to hire my attorney, who was actually on vacation. I hired him to come back, and he was sending the hospital attorneys demand letters for the preservation of her life and the right to a second opinion. And they were doing things like saying, like, oh, we never received the facts, we never did that. But once their names were public on social media and they started receiving calls, then they were willing to negotiate with my attorney. And in exchange for me taking down the doctors' names, they were willing to give her back the fluids. By that time, Part 2 of I Hate Thanksgiving, because it was the day I had to tell my entire family my sister was brain dead and about to be taken off life support. So we left off where I was able to negotiate my sister being back on fluids and getting medication to treat her pneumonia if I took down the doctor's names. And it had been like a long time, so I wasn't even confident that it was going to help or work. But I just had so much faith that God was going to show me a miracle and show my family a miracle, that I was like, I am going to do whatever it takes. And I have no regrets about it. I would still do whatever it took. And it was just like my final act of love for my sister. And so I would do it 1,000,000 times over. I have no regrets. And by the grace of God, I was able to get in contact with a neurologist on Thanksgiving who stopped what he was doing and was willing to even fly out to aid in getting me a second opinion and go check their protocols. He was calling the hospital for me, and I still keep in contact with him till this day. And I'm forever grateful for him and the power of social media, because ultimately people reaching out to him and telling him about what's going on is how he found me. By the time all the necessary tests were taken, she was put back on fluids. It was too late. Her brain had swell, and it was just like irreversible damage. And I just left the hospital, and my mother called me, and from her sobs, I could tell, just hearing a mother scream over their dying child, it's just something so animalistic about it and primal, and I will never forget that sound. And I was on a freeway entrance, and I was like, oh my God, I don't know how I made it all the way back home. And as soon as I got home, I took a deep breath, and I walked in, and everyone turned to me, waiting for good news. And all I could squeeze out was, she's gone. And just having to be the person that broke everybody's heart, it's just something that I'll never forget. And I wish I didn't have to do it. The very next day, she was going to be taken off life support, and I decided that I didn't want to be there for that. I didn't think I could handle it. I believe that her spirit was already gone, and it was just the body. And my brother and my mom also decided that they didn't want to be there. At the time, they were requiring COVID tests every 24 hours. I decided not to renew my COVID test just to make sure that I didn't change my mind later on. But once I realized that no one was going to be there, just in case she was still there, I wanted to be there. I wanted to properly send my sister off. I wanted to properly send my sister off the way it had always been, just us. So last minute, I got a new COVID test. Last minute, my brother decided that he also wanted to be there, and I let him know if he felt like he couldn't handle it, that I would be perfectly fine. We arrived. I asked the nurse if they could get a monitor to hear her heartbeat and record her last heartbeat, and they said yes, they would do that for me. I recorded it, and they unplugged the life support. And I was so terrified of that moment, and I thought it would be so scary, but it was the most beautiful moment I think I might have ever had. And I laid on her chest like a baby, and I listened to her heartbeat, and it beat so strong and loud, and it slowly got quieter and quieter and quieter until I heard it settle. I heard all the blood in her body settle, and then it's like I saw her body relax, and she just went, and it was so peaceful. And it was me, my little brother, and my big sister together the way it had always been. And it was like perfect. Oh my gosh, I'm getting emotional. And till this day, I am so glad I changed my mind and we had that final moment. But yeah, that's the reason why I hate Thanksgiving. I've